Today's lesson is from Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 6. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born.
Mary, hold your newborn son tight. Pull him to your warmth and shield his tiny body from the cold. Do you remember how afraid you were the night the angel appeared? Do you remember what he said to you? Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will be with child, and you will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever. His kingdom will never end. Do you fear what lay ahead? That this great joy and good news will also mean great pain. It has been prophesied that he will become a king, this tiny boy who lays in your arms. Do you doubt that this is true even now? Do you wonder, why does this King of Kings have no satin bedding, only straw? No lords or ladies greeting him into this world, only you, Joseph, and farm animals give witness to his birth. Do you know his Father in heaven has set a bright star in the sky this night to proclaim his birth? That a host of angels has been set to announce it to the world? That one day Magi will come bringing gifts? As you gaze upon his tiny hands, can you see the day he will use them to restore sight to the blind, cleanse lepers, and raise the dead? Do you know that one day they will be pierced? To say, caress his small feet, do you see the dust from the many miles, envision the water on which he will walk? Do you know the burden that they will one day bear as he carries the cross? When you look upon his mouth, can you hear eternity speak? Do you know of the great teachings of forgiveness that will one day define grace? But think not on that tonight, for this night he is a tiny baby wrapped in cloth and lying in a manger. Tonight, on this most remarkably unremarkable night, he is God's gift, sent to you, sent to us. Blessed are you, for tonight you hold God's Son. So hold him, Mary. Hold him tight, your newborn son, for his birth this night changes everything.
$80 miles, not that far. Delbert, I would guess that a daily commute for you is 80 miles round trip. That be right? How long does it take you to make that commute? About 45 minutes. All right. All right, from this building, front porch of this building, to Hershey, Pennsylvania, is 80 miles. Paul, how long would it take you to get from here to Hershey? About an hour. All right? Now, when I lived in Southern California, I worked in Los Angeles. We lived out in Ventura County. And the commute was 40 miles. In, 40 miles back. Lauren, how long do you think that commute took? 2 hours each way, almost exactly right. 4-hour round-trip commute. 80 miles at the worst, 4 hours. But 80 miles is also the distance between Nazareth and Bethlehem. And in the time of Joseph and Mary, it wasn't a 4-hour commute. It certainly wasn't a 45-minute commute. It was a 4-day journey. 4 days across rough roads, mountainous passes. In fact, when I think about the roads that Joseph and Mary had to travel, I think about the roads that those of us who went to Honduras experienced. Right? Now, they didn't have four-wheel drive. Granted, they didn't have Aaron driving 60 miles an hour on them either. But there were no dozers to level out those roads when they started getting pockmarked from the moisture that had come. There was no width to accommodate multiple caravans going through. They were treacherous, they were dangerous, and when Joseph traveled that road with Mary, she was 9 months pregnant, riding on a donkey. You know, when we think about the Nativity, we rarely think about Joseph. Think about that video we just saw. I mean, he was there. But it didn't take but about 5 seconds for him to be gone. And the whole thing was about Mary and the baby. And when you think about Christmas, think about the songs that we sing. We sing songs about the wise men. We sing songs about the angels. We sing songs about the shepherds. We sing songs about Mary. We certainly sing songs about the baby Jesus. And we never sing a song about Joseph. Now, why do you think that is? Who was this guy, Joseph? If he wasn't that important, why do we even mention him at all? What's the role that he plays? And why does it have any meaning to us some 2,000 years later? Well, first of all, we learn from the passage that we just read and the passage in Matthew that Delbert read for us that, first of all, Joseph was from the line of David. Now, he probably didn't think that was that important at the time. He was living up in Nazareth. He was no longer in the city of David, Bethlehem. But he was from a royal line. And somewhere in the past, there had been royalty in his family. He was a resident of Nazareth. Now, scholars today think that Nazareth at the time was probably a town of 450, 500 people max. Some people think it could have been as big as 2,000, but at any rate, it was a small town. It was so inconsequential that when Nathanael talked about it, when he was told Jesus was from there, he said, how could anything good come out of Nazareth? It's a podunk little hole in the wall. But there may have been other things that caused him to say that. Nazareth was about 4 miles away from the town of Sepphoris. Sepphoris was a military town. It was the home of a large Roman garrison. And often, towns that were near military towns tended to be the place where the soldiers went when it was time for leave and to have a little bit of fun. Now, we spent some time in Central Texas, and I was an area supervisor for a little company by the name of Whataburger, fast food chain, and I had a restaurant in Killeen, Texas. Now, Killeen, Texas is right at the gate of Fort Hood, which is the largest Army installation in the United States. Probably brag. Okay, second. All right? So every 2 weeks on a Friday night, what would happen is all the soldiers in Fort Hood that marriage could be ended. That agreement could be annulled. But once that contract was assigned, that marriage became finalized. But in the betrothal stage, the husband and the wife didn't live together. They were committed to each other. They were considered to be committed for life, but they did not consummate the relationship. And that period of betrothal might last a year, where the woman would still live with her parents. The man would be making preparations financially, whatever else, for the marriage, but they were not yet together. This is the stage that Joseph and Mary were in when we discover Joseph. And we find out that he was a carpenter. He wasn't a king. He wasn't a prince. He wasn't a guy who had any kind of big responsibilities. He was just an ordinary Joe. But his life was changed dramatically because Joseph was faced with a dilemma. And it starts from the first moment that we meet him. And it was found in what Delbert read to us. Mary is discovered to be pregnant. Joseph knows it's not his. And Mary comes to him with this neat little story. It was an angel. Okay. Right. No, really. It was an angel who came and told me about this, and this is a child of God. Put yourself in Joseph's shoes. What do you do with that? Well, Joseph was faced with a dilemma. It's told that she was found to be pregnant before they had come together, and it was through the Holy Spirit. But because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet didn't want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. You see, Joseph had some options here. Joseph could have said, this woman is a woman of ill repute. She went out, she had illicit sex while we were engaged. We were betrothed. She has violated the agreement. She needs to be prosecuted for this. And there might have been a trial. There might have been a stoning. At the very least, there would have been a shunning, and she would have been removed from society. And under the law, a man who's faithful to the law, Joseph had that right. His second choice was to kind of protect her relationship, her reputation a little bit. People would still know she's pregnant. People would still know it wasn't his, but he could very quietly annul the agreement. And maybe she could move away to another town, or she could stay with her family under some kind of protection, but she wouldn't be shunned in the same way. She wouldn't be prosecuted, and she certainly wouldn't be stoned. That was an option. His third option was to marry her. But if he married her, it would look like he was fine, and that he had been the one who sinned. So what do you do if you're a man who's faithful to the law? Well, Joseph considers it, and he wants to be compassionate to Mary. He wants to take care of her, but he doesn't want to jeopardize himself. So he makes a logical choice. I'm going to divorce her quietly. But the second step in the process hits. Suddenly Joseph has a dream. And as he was deciding, I'm going to divorce her, this is what I'm going to do, an angel comes to him. And it's interesting. When the angel comes to him, this angel starts exactly the same way he started with Zechariah, when he announced to Zechariah that John the Baptist was going to be born. He starts exactly the same way that he started with Mary, when he told Mary she was going to be the mother of God. He says, don't be afraid. Now, I'm guessing those are pretty good words to get when you get a vision of an angel out of nowhere talking to you. If you've never heard that before, The first words of "don't be afraid" are probably wisely chosen. All right? But once he's told not to be afraid, the angel confirms this baby really is from God. It really was conceived from the Holy Spirit. And you need to take Mary as your wife. Now, if you're Joseph, what do you do? It's interesting, when Zechariah gets visited by the angel, we hear the words of Zechariah. And ultimately, when he gets his voice back, we get the song of Zechariah. When Mary is visited by the angel, we hear the words of Mary. And ultimately, we hear the song of Mary. But when Joseph is visited by the angel, we never hear a word. There is no song. There is no statement. And as a matter of fact, in every passage where Joseph is mentioned, we never hear a word from Joseph. But what we do find is he makes a decision. Now, wouldn't you love to be present for that first conversation when he goes over to Mary's house? So, Mary, what did that angel look like that visited you? Right? Home? Bug-headed? Mole on his cheek? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I met that guy. And you know what? I believed him now. And suddenly he changes his decision. He does what he needs to do to make her his wife. So his decision is he did what the angel of the Lord told him to do. He took Mary home with him to be his wife. Now think about the implications of that. A little town of 450 people. They know that Mary's pregnant. By this time, she's already gone to visit Elizabeth. She's already come back. We don't know exactly how far along she is, but we know she's far enough along that everybody knows she's pregnant. And he takes her in prematurely because they haven't fulfilled their year of their betrothal. And he brings her home as his wife. What do you think the townspeople were thinking about him? What do you think they were thinking about her? Do you think they just went out into the square every day and people said, "Hey, how's life?" These people were probably outcasts in their own community because they looked like people of sin. Right? But regardless of that, and knowing that that was the cost, Joseph makes the decision. And so when we see this decision by Joseph, despite the fact that we don't hear a word from him, and never do, we learn some important things about Joseph. Number one, he was a man of conviction. He was a man who was faithful to the law, and he considered in his decision what the law told him to do, and it guided his actions. Number two, he was courageous. He put his trust in what the angel said, and then he followed it. It's one thing to say, "Okay, I believe you." It's another thing to say, "All right, I'm going to step out publicly, and I'm going to do what you asked me to do." The third thing is he was compliant. He took the action that he was asked to take by the angel of God. So we see faith, we see trust, and we see obedience. What we learn about him in all of this is he's very compassionate to Mary. He had a contractual relationship. Initially, he thought she'd broken it, and yet he tried to protect her all the way through. And then finally, when he took her as his wife, he had every right to consummate that relationship, to make her his wife in every way. And he chose not to until she had the baby. He was a man of character. So, if that wasn't enough for Joseph, if it wasn't enough that all of these things happened to him and he was forced into this decision, the next thing sort of throws it over the edge. This is Joseph's destination. Because you see, in the midst of all this, Caesar Augustus decides he's going to have everyone go to their towns to register, the town of their lineage. And they're going to have to register. It's going to allow him to find out who's who and where they are. And by the way, there were lots of rumors that there was this child going to be born, this king that was going to arise. It was going to come from a royal line, and he wanted to know where those royal lines were at. So he calls for a census. And what that means is Joseph has to make a trip. But by this time, Mary is 9 months pregnant. 80 miles. Walking, riding a donkey, crossing the Jordan River twice, up and down mountain ranges. He had two choices. And he makes heads off to the destination. So he goes to Bethlehem, and once they get there, we know the story. There is no room at the inn. And I wonder about that. I wonder what was it that caused everybody in that inn to decide they wouldn't give up their room for a woman who was 9 months pregnant and was probably already in labor. Could it be that the caravan they traveled with down from Nazareth had heard the story? They knew what was going on, and they decided she gets what she deserves. Could it be they just didn't care? Who knows? But at the end of the day, nobody gave up their room. And they end up in a cave with the animals, and this baby is born and laid in a manger. So we know that whole story. And the question is, so what as it pertains to Joseph? Who cares about Joseph's role? I mean, at the end of the day, he was really kind of nothing more than the bus driver in all of this. Right? He took her where she needed to go. She got there. Right? She had the baby. Jesus is on earth. End of story. Thank you, Joseph, for driving safely. See ya. Right? Or is there potentially something more? And I would argue to you that I think there is. Jacob was Joseph's father. Remember in the Old Testament? Jacob was Joseph's father. Joseph was a man who was guided by his dreams. In the Old Testament, Joseph was a man who was guided by his dreams. Joseph ends up making a journey to Egypt that sets up the salvation of God's people. Joseph made a journey to Egypt to set up the salvation of God's people. Accidental parallels? I don't think so. And so if they're not accidental, what's the message that God is trying to say? I think the message is in the journey. You know, when you think about the story of God's people, from Genesis chapter 1, really, all the way through the end, the story of God's people is a story of journeys. Oftentimes, it's a story of journeys that no one wanted to make. Start with Adam. Adam didn't want to leave the Garden of Eden. It certainly wasn't his choice to do that. But once he did, he was forced. He had a dilemma. He had to make a decision. And there was a new destination that he needed to go. It's about Noah. 100-year preparation for a journey to the flood. It's about Abraham. Multiple journeys, multiple destinations. Most of them places he had that Joseph appears in the times of journeys becomes important. So I think there's a lesson to be learned in Joseph's journeying. First of all, he gives us a map. Dilemmas that we face. How many times do we face dilemmas? Illnesses we didn't expect. Family upheaval we didn't ask for. Addictions that we had to address. How many times do we find ourselves in those dilemmas? Now, we don't have the advantage of the dream that Joseph got that gave him clear direction. But we still have to make a decision, and there's ultimately a destination. So what do we do when we don't have that guidance of the dream? How do we overcome that? Well, I would tell you what the Bible tells us is, in the absence of a dream, we still have very clear direction. If we look at various verses in the Bible, we see very clear direction. Psalm 37, the first verse up here says, "Delight yourself also in the Lord. He shall give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him." Step one in the journey is to wait. Think about Joseph. He was ready to make a decision. He had his mind made up. He was ready to go. And the angel says, "Stop. I want you to do something else." Waiting on the Lord brings clarity. Clarity that we need when we face the dilemmas of life. Second verse in Isaiah, "Your ears shall hear a word behind you, saying, this is the way, walk in it. Whenever you turn to the right hand, or whenever you turn to the left." I think it's interesting that it says, you will hear this word behind you. Now think about when you're taking your kids through the mall. Most of the time, when they're small, you put them in front of you. When they're large, you let them go and pray they don't come back. Right? Amen. You put them in front of you. Why do you put them in front of you? I can see where they're going. And I can tell them what to do, and I can see if they follow. And I can make adjustments in that route if I need to make it. You will hear a word behind you. God is behind us. He is there guiding us. He is there giving us that direction. And he says, walk in the way, the guidance that I give you. Number 3, Proverbs. "For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice. He preserves the way of his godly ones." been there for a